Back in the early 1970s, before plastic coolers and satellite forecasts, when every small harbor smelled of salt, diesel, and wet rope, the life of a fisherman revolved around what the sea chose to give and what his hands could turn into supper. It was a world of iron boats and weather-beaten faces, where recipes passed from one galley to another by memory, not measurement. Picture dawn breaking over a main dock or a Pacific inlet, fog hugging the masts, gulls screaming for scraps, and the first clang of a coffee pot heating on the burner. Breakfast might be yesterday's catch whatever was too small, too self-right in bacon grease beside day-old potatoes. People talk about the romance of the sea, but the truth was hunger drove invention. Fishermen had to eat well enough to work another day, so they invented flavors that balanced salt, fat, and endurance. The first of those forgotten dishes was the rough but beloved fish head stew, a thrifty meal that turned waste into warmth. Heads, collars, and bones simmered for hours with celery, onions, and the last spoonfuls of tomato paste. The broth turned cloudy and rich, thickened by the sea's own marrow. It was ladled into chipped bowls, while boots steamed by the stove. Few outside that life ever tasted it, yet every coastal town had its version. Close behind it came salt-baked bluefish, fillets buried under layers of coarse salt and slow-baked in tin ovens until firm and briny. Packed in jars of oil, they kept 4 days aboard a trawler and tasted of survival itself. By evening, when men returned from setting nets, the air around the docks filled with smoke from charcoal drums, where smelt and perch were fried whole in cornmeal. Children darted between buckets, snatching the crisp tails before the adults could stack the nets. This was seafood at its most honest, caught, cooked, and eaten within the same tide. As supermarkets spread through the country in that decade, many of those dockside foods began to fade. Convenience replaced craft. Conchioda replaced the real thing simmering in enamel pots. But back then the dockside chowder was still king. Each harbor guarded its secret twist. In Gloucester they stirred and evaporated milk. In Oregon they added dill. In Louisiana a touch of cayenne. The key was always freshness, clam juice right from the shell and scraps of whatever fish had in tea sold at market. When the weather turned, a pot of chowder might feed a crew, a family, and a few strangers too. And on those same tables you'd find clam fritters, airy and golden, made from chopped clams mixed into thick batter and dropped by spoonfuls into smoking oil. They were crisp outside, soft inside, tasting of sea and flour and Sunday afternoons. Lunch for many was mackerel hash, a skillet of leftovers fried until the edges crackled. It wasn't glamour, it was endurance. Potatoes, onions, and bits of fish, all mashed together, eaten straight from the pan. Nearby, jars of pickled herring waited for storm days when boats stayed moored. Vinegar, sugar, and spices turned humble fish into something sweet, sharp, and bright enough to cut through monotony. To outsiders, these may seem strange, but to the men who earned their living from tides, every bite carried memory and meaning. Food was comfort, proof that you'd made it bike. Even the simplest meal, a slice of bread soaked in chowder broth, was a kind of prayer. What's fascinating is how these foods mirrored the era's quiet revolution. The 1970s were years of change, processed food booming on land, while at sea the old ways persisted. There were still lobster pot pies, thick with scraps of claw, meat, cream, and vegetables, baked under pastry so flaky it shattered when tapped. There were oyster loaves, sandwiches stuffed with fried oysters and lettuce, sold from roadside shacks to travelers chasing coastal summers. There was even seaweed salad, made with kelp gathered from rocks, rinsed, and tossed with vinegar and sugar, a fisherman's version of health food before that phrase existed. These recipes told stories of thrift, adaptation, and the deep link between man and ocean. Think of the shrimp boils held on wooden docks, buckets overturned as tables, steam rising, newspaper spread, everyone eating with their hands. Corn, potatoes, shrimp, and sausage, all dumped together food that erased class and hierarchy. Because at sea, everyone was equal before hunger. Then there was cod tongue fry, a Newfoundland import that slipped quietly into New England cookbooks. Small, gelatinous pieces dredged in flour and fried crisp, eaten with lemon. Odd to modern taste, perhaps, but once a delicacy among those who knew every part of a fish had purpose. And Dante, forget crab gravy ladled over rice, a Southern fishermen, Escamfort. After long nights on the bay, by now the sun in our memory stands high over the harbor, nets drying like flags, and families gathering for midday meals. Women in aprons pass down tricks like adding molasses to baked beans to pair with fried haddock, or stirring evaporated milk into chowder to stretch it one more bowl. The men talked weather, tides, and prices, rarely realizing they were preserving a culture. Every forgotten dish was a record of balance, between hunger and abundance, between land and sea, between past and future. Have you ever wondered how many flavors disappeared simply because no one thought to write them down?